Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. President Trump urges fellow Republicans to vote for the release of the Epstein files, maintaining we have nothing to hide. The UN Security Council considers a Gaza stabilization force, but both Israel and Hamas air concerns over the possible resolution. And the former Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is sentenced to death after being found guilty of crimes against humanity. Now, US President Donald Trump has called on his fellow Republicans to vote for the release of the Epstein files. Writing on Truth Social, the president said, "We have nothing to hide, and it was time to move on from the so-called Democratic hoax." Thousands of documents relating to the convicted paedophile and disgraced financier were released last week. For more on this, I'm joined from California by Errol Moorcouch, American political strategist and spokesperson for Republicans overseas. Errol, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. President Trump U-turns on the Epstein files yet again. Is he right to get House Republicans to vote for releasing them, or has he been backed into a corner?
He's right to finally force them to release them or push them to release them. I think what has occurred has been a little bit of a self-inflicted Streisand effect, where Donald Trump has seen this as a distraction from all of his successes and what he's done on the geopolitical stage. And I think in doing so, he drew unnecessary attention to a topic that had been front and center for the Republican Party going through the election. And also to note, it had been pushed much harder by Trump's surrogates than by Trump himself. Trump has always disliked Epstein, always supported, go back to 2015, saying we should look into that island, we should look into these places. As soon as he was president again, he didn't want that overshadowing his presidency. And I think the White House realized that was a miscalculation. The base, the moderates, the people who we got to come over, a lot of them were really concerned about this very specific issue. And ultimately, the protections that this has given innocent people, which is why they haven't released the files, is because in America, if you're investigated and found innocent, they seal that file so you're not you're publicly disparaged. But myself and everybody included has said, forget about it. If you're in those files, we want to see it. Alan Dershowitz, he defended himself. If you're in there, you can defend themselves. Trump's doing the right thing. I don't think it's something he's being forced to do. It's something he wanted to do, but it's a little bit of a timing thing. And it's also to kind of take away the power from the Democrats who've started to try to use this against us, which obviously proves Trump's concept of the Democrat hoax more true, and obviously why he stepped up today to do the right thing, I think, by the American people at large.
So President Trump has turned on one of his most loyal supporters, that's Marjorie Taylor Greene, in a row over the Epstein files. Errol, let's just take a listen to what they both said about each other.
The most hurtful thing he said, which is absolutely untrue, is he called me a traitor, and that is so extremely wrong. And those are the types of words used that can radicalize people against me and put my life in danger.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't think her life is in danger. Frankly, I don't think anybody cares about her.
Trump has also called Marjorie Taylor Greene a ranting lunatic in a social media post. Do you think she is a traitor? And is this rhetoric dangerous? Because she has said that there's been threats on her life since.
So, yes, I do think she's a traitor to Donald Trump's agenda going into 2026. I think it's very important to differentiate that word because she's obviously taking it very personal, as she is a patriotic American, somebody who does care about this country in the way that she cares about it. I do not think the president is saying she's a traitor to the United States. She is, however, to give your viewers a little bit of an inside scoop, the GOP, we have internal polling, and we showed Marjorie Taylor Greene privately that she was going to lose in the upcoming midterm to John Ossoff by 20 points nearly. And John Ossoff is a very strong, moderate Democrat candidate. When we asked her to step aside so we could run a competitive candidate, she basically refused and then started to go on to the, Epstein tangents and starting to sort of throw some stones at President Trump. And this is a very important time going into the midterms where we need all hands on deck and every vote matters. Trump is the party boss. And if you're not going to get on board with President Trump, it's much like professional sports. In professional sports, you're only as good until your last game. Same goes in politics. Well, I commend Marjorie Taylor Greene for standing up for the survivors of sexual assault, and I do not think she's a traitor to the United States of America. She has been a traitor to the president's agenda, especially going into the midterm, and that's why this has happened. Now, in regard to her danger, she has said many, many, many more offensive, if you want to put in quotes, I don't think free speech is offensive, but offensive words. She has gone out there, put herself out there, been very bellicose, been very aggressive, as is her personality, as its combative personality. That's what she got her there in society. Donald Trump himself described her as a tough cookie many times throughout the last decade. And so certainly I do not think that this is going to bring any undue danger or threat to her life. She is a sitting U.S. Congresswoman, and her husband are incredibly successful financially. Nobody here thinks that some Republican person is going to go and take this and attack her. I do not feel that she's in danger, but that doesn't mean that she shouldn't be cautious, or in today's contentious environment where people like Charlie Kirk were murdered by crazy, left-wing violence, that doesn't mean that it's invalid her fears, but a lot of this was self-inflicted by her. She needs to realize her role as a legislator and Donald Trump as the president, and when she overstepped that boundary for the last time, it finally came back to bite her, unfortunately.
So, Errol, it's really interesting. You said to me that you wanted her to step aside to get somebody else to run in her place. Because as I watched Marjorie Taylor Greene, she did an interview on CNN over the weekend. She's also been doing the rounds. She did The View too. She has become more moderate. And do you think that is since she knows her position is not as watertight as she believed it could be? And this is why she's coming out fighting?
That's correct. And her type of moderate viewpoint, by the way, it's an interesting type because it's the type that overlaps with AOC or the far left fringe and the far right fringe, the Freedom Caucus and the Squad have a lot more in common than actually anybody realizes. They oftentimes both are against interventionist foreign wars. They both are looking for helping only the American working class. One of Bernie Sanders' biggest things in 2016, by the way, was to keep the border shut, no immigration, so we could help the poorest people. America First people and far left people share that. So I think that her push towards finding cohesion is probably her last gasp to see if she can still hold on to this nominee or if this is a time for her to walk away and go into media. Right now, ultimately, she doesn't have the votes. Politics changes with the winds of time, and she's done two tenures there, and it looks like in going to the third one, she wouldn't win. And if she does that and she stays on, then she becomes a liability and sandbags our party, and that's why we feel that would be a treacherous action.
And let's just get back to the Epstein files now. And could the House vote lead to the release of all the Epstein files? This is a question lots of people are asking, because obviously it goes to Congress and then Donald Trump has to sign that off. What's your feeling on it? Will we get all of these Epstein files?
I think at this point we will. There isn't a lot left besides to remove the black boxes of redaction. As well, you have bipartisan support, including the moderates, including the president. You have probably it's a 90-10 issue in America, and the 10 people who don't want it released, I assume, are guilty of something. There's nobody in the world who doesn't want to see this. If they fail to release them all, that's going to be another failure of legislature, because they keep promising this and they keep promising this. And then they say, oh, well, we have to redact this. We have to redact. It's not acceptable. So this is their chance to make it right with the American people. And the American voters are watching in 2026. And if we do not do this correctly, they will take away the mandate they gave us and they will put the Democrats in power. And we would have nothing but egg on our face for that. So it's very important for us to deliver.
Errol Moorcouch, brilliant to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having me.
The UN Security Council will vote on supporting an international stabilization force for Gaza this evening, backing President Trump's peace plan. It could pave the way for Palestinian statehood, something Israel continues to oppose. Hamas has also called the resolution dangerous and an attempt to subject the Gaza Strip to international authority. For more on this, I'm joined from New York by former Director of Communications and Senior Policy Advisor at the US Mission to the United Nations, Jonathan Wachtel. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me this evening. How has the situation in Gaza been handled at the United Nations, where we will have a vote in just a few hours' time on the US draft resolution, which is a crucial moment?
It is indeed a crucial moment. I think what we're going to see happen is that the resolution, and let's face it, the United Nations is not, things that happen to the United Nations in terms of aspirations and outcomes, it's not always a fait accompli. So whatever I say now could rapidly change if things, evolved in a way that takes a different trajectory. But that said, I do expect the Russian Federation and China to abstain on this resolution. It will likely pass, which of course gives the stamp of approval of the international community for President Trump's plan and the plan that other nations have signed up for. So that is a positive development. That said, it still leaves so many things in question. Most notably, will Hamas step out of the way to allow a future Palestinian state, let alone a sovereign Palestinian entity governed by a responsible party that is willing to make peace with its neighbor? That still remains fundamentally in question.
And Jonathan, the US draft resolution raises the possibility of a Palestinian state. Israel's Prime Minister is under immense pressure from his far-right coalition to denounce this. How much wiggle room does Netanyahu have with the international community and, of course, Donald Trump in avoiding recognizing a Palestinian state?
Yeah, that's a fundamentally accurate question there, Kellyanne. The issue here is that Israeli society is, of course, traumatized by what had happened on October 7th, and there isn't this groundswelling desire to see a Palestinian state next door as a reward for essentially carrying out atrocities and killing their citizens, and Hamas vowing to continue that type of campaign till Israel's destroyed. So tremendous concern within the Israeli population. Indeed, Prime Minister Netanyahu has cabinet members who are ultra-nationalists and don't ever want to see any sort of Palestinian state, don't even believe that there is ideological grounds for a Palestinian state, don't believe that there ever was and ever will be, and that's the position that they have. The basic truth, though, is that the situation is such that the international community is exhausted after seeing the horrors of what has befallen the Israelis and the Gazans as a result of 2 years of grinding war, and really want to see some sort of resolution here and a way forward for these two peoples to coexist. So Prime Minister Netanyahu really doesn't have much in terms of ability at this juncture, especially now that the resolution which the United States is pushing is likely to be passed, and it's legally bound by the Security Council. So this idea that there is an opportunity for the Palestinians to have sovereignty and ultimately a state should all work out well, that's nothing that Netanyahu can really stop at this juncture.
And if today's vote is passed, this will pave the way for an international stabilization force inside Gaza who would work to ensure Hamas give up their weapons. Do you think Hamas will ever agree to this and step aside?
You know, as ironic as this sounds, there would be some desire amongst the ultra-nationalist wing of Prime Minister Netanyahu's government that Hamas fail. And in failing would show the true intent of what they believe the Palestinian cause is, which is ultimately destruction of Israel in their minds, and prove that the Palestinians are not worthy of complete sovereignty, let alone statehood. It is really unknown. Hamas has taken up positions across the parts of the Gaza Strip that they were handed over by the IDF in their partial withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and they're not showing any sign of capitulating, of giving up, of handing over to an authority that would take over the governance, and they are clinging to things as if they feel that they still have a place and position at the negotiating table.
So much about President Trump's 20-point plan, as we've just been talking about, Jonathan, it does remain uncertain. But one thing that is certain is Palestinians are still suffering inside of Gaza. The ceasefire was meant to stop this suffering. But do you think it's done enough and the United Nations have done enough?
Well, the United Nations is in a bit of a quandary here. It had a system in place in which they essentially were taking the outsourcing of all responsibility in terms of running the humanitarian needs of the Gazan population, schools and all that, and left Hamas, which was in charge, to work on their aspirations to essentially continue their campaign to destroy the state of Israel. So the United Nations now is in this kind of awkward position in which they have to find a place after this resolution is passed as to what their role is going to be. I mean, it clearly will be humanitarian in nature, but it as an organization has really not showed much in terms of bringing the two parties together to be able to find a path of coexistence together. And it really is taking outside the United Nations energy to bring this about. While it's a good thing that there seems to be international support for some sort of trajectory that will bring the Palestinians and Israelis to a place that is not locked in this endless cycle of violence, the United Nations is somewhat marginalized as an organization in terms of what they are able to bring to the table after decades of inability, essentially, to find a path forward that would work out some sort of reconciliation between the two parties.
Jonathan Wachtel, thank you so much for joining me and for your insights. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has signed a deal with France to obtain 100 Rafale fighter jets. Zelensky's meeting with President Emmanuel Macron in Paris comes after at least 3 people have died in missile and drone strikes in Kharkiv. Russian defenses say they've destroyed 36 Ukrainian drones over 7 Russian regions overnight. Chile's presidential election is going to a runoff vote after a round on Sunday produced no winner. Neither Communist Party's Jeanette Jara nor far-right Jose Antonio Cast were able to secure 50% of the votes. The election campaign was dominated by crime and immigration as candidates pledged to fight foreign gangs. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman will meet with President Donald Trump in Washington tomorrow. The leaders are expected to discuss key agreements, including defense, energy, AI, and mining. The two leaders last met in Riyadh on the 13th of May earlier this year. And the three stars of the Netflix Falcon live stream have taken their first flight. Over 3 days, the peregrine falcon chicks spread their wings and soared over the Melbourne city skyline. The live stream has captured the hearts of thousands of Australians and us on the show too. Very cute. Now, a spat between Japan and China is threatening to spiral. China is retaliating against comments made by Japan's Prime Minister that the country would respond to a Chinese attack on Taiwan with military action. It has placed a travel advisory on Japan and is urging Tokyo to immediately retract the statement. Japan's foreign ministry is now scrambling to get the situation under control. Chris Gilbert has more.
The head of Japan's foreign ministry, Masaki Kanai, is dashing to Beijing to meet with his Chinese counterparts. His mission is urgent: to calm simmering tensions after Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi angered China by claiming a Chinese attack on Taiwan could trigger a military response. Beijing wants her statement withdrawn immediately.
The wrongful remarks made by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi regarding Taiwan have deeply hurt the sentiments of the Chinese people and severely deteriorated the atmosphere for people-to-people exchanges between China and Japan.
It was only weeks ago that Takaichi met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Korea, promising improved ties. Now China's ruling out meeting with her on the sidelines of the upcoming G20 summit in South Africa until her statement is retracted. On Sunday, Beijing sailed military vessels through the disputed Senkaku Islands, an action historically provocative for Japan. News reports and social media posts have also been warning Chinese students in Japan about, quote, social instability. Tokyo claims that Beijing is exacerbating the situation and has requested that China back down.
China's warning against traveling to Japan seems to curtail the exchange of people between the two countries, including study abroad and tourism, and is incompatible with our aims for a mutually beneficial, constructive and stable relationship.
Chinese airlines say the warning has seen almost 500,000 cancelled plane tickets to Japan. 70 to 80% of outbound flights from China to Japan were affected over Sunday and Monday. The announcement has also sent tourism and retail stocks in Japan plummeting. Department stores plunged 12%, while airlines JAL and ANA also dropped. It's now up to the two countries' foreign ministries to try and stem the bleeding. Chris Gilbert, Arabiya English.
Former Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been sentenced to death after being found guilty of crimes against humanity. The ousted leader was convicted of ordering a crackdown on student-led protests. The UN estimates up to 1,400 people were killed in the violence. Security has now been increased across Bangladesh over fears of a backlash. I'm now joined by Al Arabiya journalist Darshan Dalal. Darshan, thank you so much for joining me this evening. What's the latest from the tribunal following the announcement of Sheikh Hasina's death sentence?
Yeah, thanks, Leigh-Ann. This was one of the highly anticipated rulings in Bangladesh. And there were tense scenes in Dhaka and across Bangladesh. People were glued to their screens, whether it was on television or on mobile phones, as the as the judge basically gave out the ruling, people erupted in cheers. The former prime minister, who was ousted in July last year, she was found guilty on crimes against humanity, particularly against 3 counts. First one was an incitement, and secondly, she was basically found guilty on the count of failing to prevent those horrific atrocities. And finally, she was also found guilty on the count of ordering the killings against the student protesters back in July. A little bit of background to those July protests by students. These were basically the student protests against a government quota system. The students were demanding a fair merit-based recruitment system. They said that this quota basically favored Sheikh Hasina's party, Awami League supporters, and sort of gave them higher perks and job security. And this protest sort of morphed into a campaign to oust her, which basically eventually ousted her. And at this time, Sheikh Hasina was serving her 4th term. And if my memory serves me right, this was an election boycotted by the opposition, and in which she secured 97% of the votes. So she was accused of having an authoritarian regime. Many observers were sort of like accusing her of heavy-handed ruling. This particular tribunal, International Crimes Tribunal, that has given out the ruling against her was basically a tribunal set up by herself. She advanced this tribunal and sort of defended this tribunal. It was first set up back in 2010, where it was basically supposed to carry out the rulings to prosecute the people in the Bangladesh's War of Independence in 1971, when it get independence from Pakistan. Back then it was called East Pakistan. But today, this same tribunal that she once set up, she was basically using it as her go-to instrument to basically silence her political rivals, has now given a death sentence to her.
And Darshan, as you say, the death sentence has been given to Sheikh Hasina. But what is the interesting thing is we know Sheikh Hasina is in exile currently, and she is in India. What have we heard from the Indian government, and what have we heard from Hasina herself at this stage?
Yes, so Hasina has put out a statement right after the ruling. She said this ruling is basically politically motivated and biased. She has not acknowledged the authority of this court. She says that this is the court set up by a government which is not democratically elected, and she has basically denounced this. She has also said that she is willing to convey all her points and in terms of what all the accusers are saying against her, and that she's also even willing to go to The Hague. As we know that she remains in exile in New Delhi in India. New Delhi has also put out a statement following the tribunal's ruling. India has said that it has noted this ruling by the International Crimes Tribunal, and it remains committed to peace and stability in the neighboring country. However, it has not expanded on whether India plans to send her back to her own country, which is the demand from the Bangladeshi government. Right after the ruling, the Bangladeshi Foreign Ministry set out a statement asking for her to be extradited back to Dhaka, where she can basically face the full force of law and justice. But there is no details from New Delhi at this point.
Yeah, it's really interesting because India also said that it has noted the verdicts against Bangladesh's former Prime Minister, and that as a close neighbour, India remains committed to the best interests of the people of Bangladesh. But Darshan, what does this verdict mean for the interim government right now in Bangladesh? And could it complicate the elections that are coming up in the country in February?
Yes, so we finally have a date or sort of like timeline for the elections in Bangladesh. We earlier did not have those. Now we know that they are supposed to happen in February. This particular ruling can be seen as a win for this interim government. when the Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus took over the government, he basically promised people that he will hold those people accountable for the atrocities that happened in July protests. And this particular ruling can be seen as a reconciliation for those families who lost loved ones. Around 1,400 people were killed in these protests and thousands were maimed. So this particular ruling can be seen as a win for Yunus's government. However, leading up to the elections in February, his government has also barred Hasina's party, Awami League, from contesting those elections. So it remains to be seen how it will pan out. However, we can expect protests, even mobilizations by Awami League, because Awami League, let's say it's one of the biggest political parties in the country, and Hasina has a large supporter base who even came out even before today's ruling. There were some protests and even unrest before the ruling. So even the police in the country and in Dhaka had given out a shoot at sight order in terms of any arsonists or if there was any violence. So we can expect some sort of violence in turbulent times for Bangladesh ahead.
Darshan, thank you so much for speaking to me. Venezuela's Cartel de los Soles could be considered a foreign terrorist organization by the US State Department. The United States believe the group is led by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, something Maduro strongly denies. It comes as the Trump administration continues to crack down on drug trafficking and weighs up military action in the South American nation. For more on this, I'm joined from Caracas by reporter Norris Ogotti. Norris, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you can hear me. First of all, how is the Venezuelan government reacting to Washington's decision to designate the Cartel de los Soles as the foreign terrorist organization?
Hello, thank you so much for this opportunity. Well, as of today, or in the last 24 hours, the response from Maduro's government has been to backlash the U.S. and to call it like a provocation or a campaign disinformation campaign against Venezuela. They are denying any kind of links with a drug cartel or links with terrorist organizations. And that has been also the response from other officials from Maduro. Like the national television has been showing a lot of propaganda to support Maduro and to support the government. And also they are saying that this could be another step for the U.S. to justify further pressure in Maduro's government, even a possible military intervention. But there's no signs that the government currently is planning to change this rhetoric against the United States.
So what is the general mood on the streets of Caracas today where you are, especially with this growing speculation about possible US military action?
That's a great question. Well, as you know, I've been able to walk on the streets and to talk to a lot of people in Venezuela. What we're seeing right now is mixed emotions. There are some people that are indeed worried, mostly because of these military deployments from the U.S. in the Caribbean. But the big majority of Venezuelans are more worried about the day-to-day economic chaos that the country is leading to right now, especially because the holidays are coming and there's and this is a season where the expenditure is bigger than throughout the year. So people are more worried about how are they going to end up this year economically and how are they going to face the next year hurdles than the diplomatic disputes. Of course, people are worried, let's put it like this, they are trying to survive this economic and political environment. But what we see more is tiredness, tiredness and confusion towards what's going to happen in the country. People are running to the stores trying to buy as much as they can. trying to be as much prepared as they can for any possible outcome in the country.
A difficult situation right now, but I was just wondering, has President Maduro or any members of his inner circle made additional statements responding to the US allegations linking them to drug trafficking? And is President Maduro keen to speak to President Donald Trump?
Yes, that's what international media and even President Trump said yesterday. They said that he said that Maduro is willing to talk to him. He doesn't know what he wants to talk about, but he's willing and open to talk. But the pressure is there. And Nicolas Maduro keeps denying to have any kind of links to drug cartels or trafficking organizations. They are categorically denying these allegations from Washington and saying that this is just another campaign of disinformation, of attacking Venezuelan sovereignty. And that's the general rhetoric. And it has been for the past few weeks and even so today.
Are there any visible changes in military presence or security measures in Caracas right now following the deployment of the USS Gerald Ford to the Caribbean, Norris?
Well, Maduro's government has said that they are ready to defend the country. There have been some military exercises, but outside of the main cities. In the city, for example, in Caracas, the capital where I am currently, there's not a huge deployment of officials. Of course, you can see more security towards the governmental buildings and maybe in the main avenues, but nothing that you can call as unexpected or something that's not ordinary in the day-to-day military deployment. Of course, there have been a lot of censorship, more pressure into the citizens, and more, vigilance in terms of what they speak, what the opinions are on social media. They're incarcerating people just for saying things in social media, such like ads or even posts of Instagram. And even journalists are being currently held in prison for their opinions regarding this situation. Even so, or moreover, if people are talking or sympathizing with Donald Trump's movements towards Venezuela currently.
Norris Ogotti there in Caracas. Thank you so much for joining us and giving your insights into what's happening at the moment in Venezuela. Let's take a look at the top business news now. The Federal Aviation Administration said it would end mandated cuts in domestic flights at 40 major US airports. This is expected to ease restrictions that have been imposed over air traffic control during the shutdown. On Friday, air traffic controllers began receiving back pay equal to about 70% of what they were owed. The Supreme Court in New Zealand has ruled that Uber drivers are employees rather than contractors. The Workers' First Union said the court's judgment paves the way for thousands of Uber drivers to pursue full employment rights. The landmark case was brought to the courts by two unions on behalf of the 4 Uber drivers 3 years ago. Turning to all the sports news now, and Matt Fitzpatrick has emerged a winner of the 2025 DP World Tour Championship in Dubai, while Rory McIlroy won the race to Dubai for the 7th time in his career. The new DP World Tour season will commence next week at Royal Queensland GC in Brisbane. McIlroy returns to action following the week Crown Australian Open in Melbourne. And Italy's Yannick Sinner finished the season with a trophy for the 2nd year in a row, earning a win as the 2025 ATP Finals competition. Sinner's rival, Spanish Carlos Alcaraz, led 4-love before the match but suffered an injury during the first set. The victory added a record $5 million in prize money for Sinner. And former world heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua will fight YouTube star Jake Paul in a professional bout next month in Miami. The fight, which will be streamed live on Netflix, will consist of 8 3-minute rounds. And a reminder of our top stories. President Trump urges fellow Republicans to vote to release the Epstein files, maintaining we have nothing to hide. The UN Security Council considers a Gaza stabilization force, but both Israel and Hamas air concerns over the possible resolution. And the former Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is sentenced to death after being found guilty of crimes against humanity. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on X too, and we'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.